Okay, so just continuing in Daniel chapter 7. I think, just continuing Daniel chapter 7. Oh, it's gone. When you look for the list of 7, I believe sometimes in some lists the Huns are there and some they're not. So the question is, where do the Huns play a part? Now, even if you can't see the Huns, I guess, in Daniel 7, you can definitely see the Huns in which chapter? Revelation 8. So, just for clarity's sake, just in case it's a stumbling block for everyone, Revelation 8, you can certainly see the Huns. Everyone agree with that? Everyone happy with that? So, let's look and learn a bit more about these Huns described in Revelation 8. But I'm going to read historically about them. So, the Huns were a nomadic tribe whose origin is unknown, but most likely they came from somewhere. By the way, again, this is one of the historian websites. I've got www.ancient.eu, but you can look at other historian websites. The Huns were a nomadic tribe whose origin is unknown, but most likely they came from somewhere between the eastern edge of the Altai Mountains and the Caspian Sea, roughly modern Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan is just underneath Russia, and when you look at this description, it's talking about the southern part of Russia. They are first mentioned in Roman sources by the historian Tacitus in 91 CE as living in the region around the Caspian Sea. At this time, they were not a threat to Rome. In time, this would change as the Huns became one of the primary contributors. Listen to this. The Huns became one of the primary contributors to the fall of the Roman Empire. We know that from the trumpets, Revelation 8. And as their invasions of the regions around the empire, which were particularly brutal, encouraged what is known as the Great Migration, also known as the Wandering Nations. The migrations of people such as the Alans, the Goths, the Vandals disrupted the status quo of Roman society. So they even caused the other trumpets to sound, because the Goths and some of these other tribes would never have came in by the Roman Empire had the Huns not been causing trouble and growing in power. So it says, under Attila, the Huns became the most powerful, most feared military force in Europe. Interesting. So after Rome, the Huns became the most powerful, most feared military force in Europe. The armies of Rome would be who today? America. And after America, who's the strongest military force with nuclear weapons? It's Russia in Europe. And brought death and devastation wherever they went. After Attila's death, it goes on to talk. Let me read this next one from Wikipedia. The Huns were a nomadic people who lived in Eastern Europe. It goes on to say between 1st and 7th century. As per the European tradition, they were the first reported living east of the Volga River. Anyone know where the Volga River is? It's in Russia. It's the biggest river that runs through Russia. Famous river. In an area that was part of Scythia at the time. So here we see, historically at least, there's no doubt about it that the Huns originated in Russia. And can we agree that at least Daniel 7 covers the period in the history of Europe? Is Russia within Europe? This is a big point. Is Russia in Europe? No. Just say how you understand it. Some say no. Why do you say no? Okay, part of the European Union, someone says. Therefore, it's not EU. Some say... Okay, okay. Anyone at the back have any thoughts?
Geographically, yes, but no.
I don't know how to answer that. Do I mean geographically? I just mean, is it in Europe or not? No.
Russia is a continent for itself.
Okay, okay,
Actually, you've got Russia, you've got Asia.
okay. Okay, so a few, what do you think? Huh? Huh? It's in Asia. Is anyone at the back on the left? And then one more comment. You think it's part of the EU, part of Europe? Okay, I'll read a quote from Ellen White, quite clear. Life Sketches 287.2. And we read it. Talking about Elder Conradi. It says he was having visited the churches and companies of Sabbath keepers in Germany, Russia, and Switzerland, he reported that one of the most urgent needs of the European fields was books on present truth.
The four European powers in 1840.
Yeah, really couldn't do that. Yeah, you're right. But you're right. Good.
So someone's mentioned...
Life Sketches, 287. Life Sketches 287. Sorry, this pen is very good. But it establishes that Russia is in Europe. Yeah? Prophetically, because she's a prophet, right? It's in Europe, Russia. There's quite a few quotes. I'll just read one other one which I read before. You should have caught the clue if you were listening. Signs of the Times, December 8, 1887, says, in nearly all parts of Europe, the laws are more or less oppressive upon those who observe the Sabbath. But there are few countries in which the difficulties in the way of presenting the truth are greater than in Russia. So she's saying it's hard in Russia to get the truth out, in Europe to get the truth out. One of the hardest places in Europe is Russia. So Russia is in Europe. Yeah, and there's more quotes, but I'm just giving you two. So Russia is part of Europe, just as France was part of Europe. And therefore, I would suggest it's somewhere in Daniel 7, but obviously more clearly when we're looking at the Huns and their origin in Revelation 8.
So someone's just mentioned Russia under the four European powers, and that answers a next question for us, which is, does Revelation mention Russia in its more modern state? So it mentions the Huns, which we know develops into Russia, but does it actually mention Russia? And someone has mentioned Revelation 9, 14 and 15. And we know that the Great Controversy comments on this prophecy in Revelation 9. Great Controversy 335, paragraph 1, says, at the very time specified, Turkey, through her ambassadors, accepted the protection of the Allied powers of
Europe,
and thus placed herself under the control of Christian nations. Now when you go into the encyclopedia and you find this treaty, it was the Treaty of London it was called, in 1850, who was it signed by, which countries are on that document? You can view the document online. And who
described as the Allied powers of Europe.
England, Austria, Prussia, Russia. Prussia was Germany and a couple other countries. So you have England, Austria, Prussia, and Russia. So you can here see Russia is, it says Christian nation. Christian nation, what it is. Yeah, Orthodox Christian. The protection of the Allied powers of Europe, and thus placed herself under the control of Christian nations.
So I think we can all agree, one way or another, that we do find Russia again in Bible prophecy, and both in Daniel and in Revelation. And I would probably say the main point on Daniel 7 now that I would use that is much clearer is because Daniel 7 is covering really the history of Europe. And we saw that Russia is within Europe. And here it's covering the history of the Roman Empire, which was Western and Eastern Europe. And so Russia is within there. And then we saw that it's the king of the south here, but that's what we're investigating, so we didn't read on there. But we've had all these characteristics which are taken from Daniel 11. So it's establishing this. Yeah? And then we went through Revelation 9, 14 and 15, which is really clear. I think Josiah says, in 1840, England, Russia, Austria and Prussia interposed with the Ottoman Empire. That was the fulfillment of Josiah Lich's prophecy. Remember that? 391 years. Russia was connected to that. So it was part of Bible prophecy, even in the Millerite movement. So why not in ours? If history repeats itself. And we saw that it's definitely in Europe. The other one was Signs of the Times. Should probably put it here. Life Sketches 287 and Signs of the Times. I think it was December. So 1887. Sorry? Or 8? 1888? Oh, December 8, 1887. Okay. So we see here, I don't know how many testimonies you need, but we see here from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points, and also from Daniel 2, 7, 11, Revelation 8 now I'm going to add here, because that was the Hun history. So just for clarification on the record, in terms of the Huns, I'm going to place it here, because we know the Huns are found definitely in Revelation 8. And we saw historically the origin of the Huns was southern Russia. And a lot of different historians confirm that. So we've seen from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different places in Daniel and Revelation that Russia are also brought to prophetic view. So brothers and sisters, can you see that the king of the south in Daniel 11 brings down the king of the north in verse 11 and 12? Can you see that this Russia, basically all of this is just to say that this person in our time, and I'm going to put this at this event, is Russia, and it deals and it comes against the armies of the king of the north, which is the United States of America. And so the Bible is trying to tell us that Russia, Soviet Russia, is going to have some sort of conflict or coming against with the United States of America. And that's the external event which brings an internal persecution, because verse 11, the king of the south cast down many. There's an internal persecution, and God is requiring us to know and understand what this will look like in practice. Is this going to be some sort of military combat, a physical combat? Is this going to be like a Cold War using press and visual things that you read and see, which you can just go to the news, and these two are always against each other all the time in the news? Or, I don't know if you want to share on that point.
Well, this is something to study out. So, another option for how this will play out in our history is that when you go to verse 11 in the Battle of Raphia, the wording of the verse says that the multitude would be given into the hand of the king of the south. And we know that multitude represents an army. We went through some verses in the week.
Judges 4:7 was one of them.
So, if multitude represents an army, who's the army of the king of the north in our history?
America.
America. So America is the army of the king of the north. And the king of the south is given the army. In verse 11. Go to verse 11 and read it. Let's read verse 11. It says, "And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he, that's the king of the north, shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And we explored that. You know, it's God who gives and takes away. So he's given into his hand. So in our history, what we're looking for is the USA to be given into the hand of Soviet Russia. So there's two ways of looking at that. Either it's total destruction, or it's an alliance, or it comes on its side. But if it would be given into its hand, what is in your hand, is that stronger than you?
Yeah, no, in your hand is weaker than you.
If it's in your hand, it's weaker than you. So you therefore have power to persuade its laws. Don't you? You then have power, if it's in your hand, to help it to enact laws.
And it's interesting, sorry, just a thought. It says in verse 41, but these shall escape out of his hand. And that's the time when he passes a law and the people, three groups of people are able to not bow down to that law because they're no longer in the hand. But here they're in the hand, which is your point.
Yeah. So that's something to investigate. So we put it to you to investigate and to study out, line upon line, whether at this point here, at midnight, whether we're seeing Russia militarily taking down the USA militarily, or whether we are to see Russia pushing communistic laws into America, or allying with America to kind of compel them to make communistic laws in America. Makes sense?
It's interesting because there is a friendship between Putin and Trump.
It's very interesting.
They seem to have a kinship.
On the
It makes you wonder if
So I talk
the
about
shock
meats and
would be
persons.
when Russia pushes against, pushes against the USA militarily.
So on the
Maybe
back,
that will surprise everyone because of the relationship.
on the backdrop of that, because we can't look at just what's happening at the minute, because anything can turn anyway. Yeah, but on the backdrop of that, because it is still valid that is happening. But on the backdrop of that, we know that the Medes and the Persians were a two-horned power in history. And they have very similar characteristics to the USA in that you have Ahasuerus, who was a Persian king, and he is creating a law against God's people. We know this is a typification of the laws that America will be passing. So on one hand, you know that Medo-Persia in some instances is representing the USA. But you have in the Bible 2 instances where Medo-Persia is creating laws that, well, one is for killing God's people, that's Ahasuerus, and he's being influenced by Haman to make this law. And another is Darius the Mede, so that's both the Medes and the Persians, Darius the Mede, and he's being influenced by his royal associates to create a law. And the law that Darius the Mede passes was atheistic. Was an atheistic law. Yeah, because we define atheism as there is no God. But atheism is a worship of self. And Darius was persuaded to pass a law that said you can bow to no other God but me. You can pray to no other God but me. And Daniel found himself in a position where now he's being thrown to the lions, but he's delivered miraculously. Now, we found out when we went into the history of what happened in verse 11 and 12, was that in verse 12, when there was a persecution on God's people after the king of the south won this battle, or was given this multitude, when the persecution was on God's people in verse 12, they were actually delivered miraculously. There was like a lot of parallels, both in the decree that Ahasuerus makes in Esther, and also the decree that Darius makes in the book of Daniel. So, with that in mind, I don't think it would be a far jump to suggest that America, since Medo-Persia can represent America in some ways, that America would at some point make an atheistic kind of law, which would persecute God's people, but would be pushed on them or persuaded by King of the South, and God's people would be miraculously delivered somehow.
I just had a thought on that. Sorry, before I take your question. Remember in this history, the King of the South was attempting to get into where? Just in the story, the basic story. No, he went to Jerusalem. The story was he went into Jerusalem, and while he was in Jerusalem, the leaders called him, said, come to our temple, offer sacrifices. He goes to the temple, offers sacrifices, and he says, wait a minute, what's in there? Most holy place. I want to get in there. So where did he attempt to get into? The most holy place. And whenever anyone entered into the most holy place, what was brought to view? In prophecy. When Christ entered the most holy place, what did the Advent people see and learn about? The law of God, particularly which one? The Sabbath. And so he attempts to enter into the most holy place here. So what's his attempted attack, though he fails? It's the law of God. But he gets so far. He gets very close. I think he gets to the second compartment. He just doesn't get to the third. He gets halfway. Is there any laws on the Sabbath where it will be not quite the full Sunday law, but it will be halfway towards it? Blue laws, labor laws. Could that be a possibility? Because by verse 16, King of the North comes on the scene. He attempts to get into the most holy place, and he succeeds. And he succeeds on the Sabbath day. And after the 3-month siege, every Sabbath attacking and coming closer and closer on the final Sabbath, he brings down all of Jerusalem, destroys the whole temple, and for the first time in history ever, he enters the most holy place on the Sabbath, representing the Sunday law. And he succeeds here. This is the full Sunday law. But he attempted it here. And he got halfway. So just in line with what you were saying, this thought is just coming to me now, whether this attempted is somehow, because we know there was a decree here, somehow in line with some sort of blue laws, but then by here, it's the Sunday law. Just a thought. But either way, brothers and sisters, as we continue to investigate these verses, the Lord is asking, are we ready? Because by the time he got to here, there was a great, in fact, even before they're here, it says, and he shall cast down many 10,000s. There was betrayal, there was death, there was a slaughter, even here at midnight. It says that a lot of people, when this decree was made, those who would not worship his god, the god of Bacchus, would receive a hot brand of iron on their face. So there was some alliance with, again, Sunday issues. But the question is, are we ready? Because this is not the Sunday law. This is not even the midnight cry. This is earlier. And this is Russia playing a part. And we see Russia already on the scene. And Christ is saying, are you ready? Are we really, really ready? And you can go all the way through Daniel chapter 11, and there's so many practical things that God is asking us to do to be ready. And the question is, are we doing it? And I know I'm pretty much short on time, and so as I close in the next 2 or 3 minutes, I just want to see and look at some of the practical points that Daniel 11 is even bringing out to us to see, are we ready? Are we ready? What does the first verse say? It says that Daniel, Gabriel speaking, in the first year of Darius the Mede, he stood to strengthen and confirm who? Darius. On a very practical level, does God give us the same mission and work to strengthen and confirm each other in the faith? Yes, he does. And does he even bring it closer to home in our families? Yes, he does. Are we confirming and strengthening our spouses and our children in these truths? Adventist Home, page 217, paragraph 1, for the husbands. Let the wife feel that she can lean upon the large affections of her husband, that his arms will strengthen and uphold her, and her burden will lose half its weight. Oof. Half its weight will be gone. Her weight, husbands, if you would just strengthen her, encourage her. Isn't that practical? Isn't that part of our work? Let's go down to verse 3. Verse 3 says that when Alexander the Great came on the scene, that he would do according to his will. What is the will? The power to choose. When did Alexander the Great learn to choose? How did he learn to choose? When do you learn in life to choose? In your childhood. So when you really go into this, you're looking back to Alexander the Great's childhood. Ellen White says, and by the way, you know, in his childhood, I think it was as early as the age of 12, his father put him to training with a man called Aristotle. Everyone knows Aristotle here, one of the greatest atheistic philosophers. And for the next 5 or 6, 7 years of Alexander the Great's life, up until he took the throne as king, he was trained by Aristotle. And do you know who trained Aristotle? Plato. And he was in his universities for almost 20 years learning. So where do you think all that false education was feeding? Whose mind as Alexander the Great was growing? Into his mind. And so when he ruled, he didn't rule according to God's will because his education wasn't directed towards it. Are we educating our children in God's will? Child Guidance, page 120.1, says their whole future life depends upon the education you give them in their childhood years. Everything. Alexander the Great's whole future depended on what he learned when he was a kid. To some of these children, the Lord gives an early intimation of his will. Don't we neglect the little children sometimes? Oh, it's not so important, not now. If it's not now, then when? Because that's when the character is formed. God is asking us to have a practical preparation.
Adventist Home 3:10, paragraph 2 says, too often the parents are not united in their family government. Where did we see division in Daniel chapter 11?
I've rubbed out the title. Greece. The whole kingdom of Greece is about division.
Verse 4 says, when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven. United we stand, divided we fall. A fitful government, at one time holding the lines firmly, and at another allowing that which has been condemned. This is ruination to a child.
Did you catch that?
At one time holding the lines firmly, not aggressively, firmly, and at another time allowing that which has been condemned. So fitful governments, parents are not united. Not only that, but the way you deal with the child is divided or different. It differs all the time. So one time you're being disciplined, at another time you've condemned it, but you just allow it. It says this is ruination to the child.
Just like it was ruination to Greece. It's ruination on the internal kingdom in the home. God is asking us to be serious. God is asking us to be practical, and God is asking us to get ready because midnight is just around the corner. And all of these things God will judge us upon. As we heard, it's not just a theory of the truth, but it's a practice and a doing of the truth. Is it your desire to practice the truth beginning in your own home? Is that your desire? Is that your will? If it's your desire to be ready and to continue to investigate as students of prophecy this event here and this line of events so that we can be ready and our families can be ready and our church can be ready And whoever God desires to be saved, because he's not willing that any should perish, be ready. If that's your desire, then let's kneel to pray. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. Dear Father in heaven, we ask for your forgiveness. We are divided like Greece. We are fitful like Alexander the Great. And you said that, what does it mean to conquer and rule nations when we can't conquer and rule our own spirit? We ask, O Lord, that you would help us, that we would see the end from the beginning and not repeat the wrong history, that we would stand on the side for truth. How clear are these lines of evidence? But Lord, how quick we are to doubt and not to put these things into practice. Help us, O Lord, to do your will and to understand your will, is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.